CAMPO, a space to debate, study and celebrate architecture.
Okay, so this is very interesting because introducing a good friend, first of all, is Alberto Iacovoni from ma0's office, and it's very strange for me to do an English presentation in Roma, but this is very good for CAMPO. So thanks to our guest to push us to speak in English and to open this new kind of talk series in the real language of architecture. So today, in CAMPO we organize exhibition and at the same time not really conference of book presentation. So we call them talk because for us it's really very interesting that after the presentation we start a discussion. So this is not a museum, it's not a place where usually organize lecture and things. So this is the idea of CAMPO. It's open a discussion with the people, with the writers, with the architect that we invite to do the presentation. So also I don't want to open a dialogue with Alberto because we start our dialogue in 91, 92. So we cannot say more. But I'm really very interested in this idea that when an architect starts to write around a book about his work, that is not a monography. In that sense, this is another interesting thing. We have that you cannot really have these kind of things in the book or in the magazine, because there is an incredible period from the 95 until 2005, 10 years, when Roma was really a place where there is a lot of energy, a lot of groups, office of young architects in that moment, and Alberto was one of those young architects, but they became a kind of point of reference for the young generation that they grow up inside the university. So for us, it's really very important that guest Alberto, also because the book is not a traditional book. So the book is a kind of diary, what I call a diary, or Alberto call a manual. From my point of view, it's a very specific book about the two authors that they describe their methodology and the way of working inside the office. So after the presentation, we will have time to discuss about that. Grazie.
Grazie. Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you, Matteo, Gianfranco, Campo. I'm very excited to make this presentation, also together with Nika. It's the first time that we are together to present the book. We wrote together, and of course I'm very excited because I'm in Rome. I had to write a book to bring together some friends and to discuss about architecture, so I hope that after my introduction, I hope it will be shorter as possible. Well, there are quite a lot of slides, but we will go quite quick. What is ma0's Little Pig book? Well, since the beginning, the idea was to make a handbook, so a manual, a book with a set of instructions. I've always been very much fascinated by all those books that describe not how things are made, but how things can be made. So more the process than the things in themselves. For example, when I was in the university, the Manuale dell'Architetto was a book in which you could find how to draw, I don't know, a window, how to draw a parking lot, and so on. But I never find a book in which there was written the process through which doing the things. So all these books are books about how to do things, and they give you a set of instructions, and then you try to do the things. And then what is nice is that what happens after, it's always different, like a cookbook. So it's been a long time I wanted to make a book about architecture, like one of those. Why? Also because this, the idea of a book as a set of instructions is very close to how we have practiced and thought about architecture. So the idea that architecture can be, in itself a set of special rules. A set of special rules that in certain ways, different ways, they influence the way people behave, the way people relate, the way space is relating between them. And so, for example, the book I wrote before were about this idea of architecture as a game, like game zone, or the following one, which was playscape. And so the idea of making a manual, like the big book is more or less based on the same line. So if the two previous books were about architecture as a set of spatial rules, in this case is architecture, how to make architecture following a series of rules. A manual, so a handbook. The idea of this book was born in the office, basically. So the idea is that we have in our office, like in many other offices, many people come in. Interns, fresh graduated architects, and so every time I have to repeat the same things. How we work, which are the principles. So that's how that's how the book began. And the book has this kind of foundational approach. The first pages are completely white. There is not so much architecture. Then little by little, the architecture is built through the pages, through a series of principles and rules. So yes, these are some of our interns. So this was the first idea for the book. But it was not only the reason why I decided to write this book, and I proposed to Nika to write it together. At a certain point, something happened. 1 year ago, I went in Doha for 1 year to teach in an art school, space. My course was space, next. And I had to teach to people with a completely different culture from mine. This was one of my students. Not all of them were wearing these abayas. But anyway, there was a very big distance. I had to really explain what was space, which are the values of space. So this was another element that brought me back to the need to explain architecture from the basics. In a completely different culture. So now we have a book that we can give to all our interns. People that arrive in the office have the manual, they have to read it, and they have, of course, to know every page, and if you make mistakes and you didn't read well page 194. Next. But in reality, the idea of a book for beginners is based on the idea that we are, at ma0's, we work always as beginners. We start our project always from this sense of being lost. Lost because I think that to be lost is of course, is a contemporary condition. We have lost many of our point of references. I think also that starting a project, feeling lost, I learned that from the history of architecture and art, that getting lost is a way to rebuild reality. For example, this map has always been very important. This map by Guy Debord, of course the theorist of the situationists, that getting lost is the best way to having the power of reshape reality. Next. And also getting lost and to getting to a state in which we don't recognize the value of things, but we have to rediscover them through direct relationship, experimenting always the value of things, and also this image has always been very important by Bruno Munari, the Italian designer, which is research for comfort on a comfortable chair. We have always to rediscover the value of things. So that's the way we start every time our projects. But maybe this idea of that we are all beginners is also inside the essence of architecture. Architecture is made, the world is made of two parts. One is the arche, and the other one is the tecton. So the arche is really the principle of starting from the beginning, from creating again and every time from the beginning something, while Tecton is the technical part of architecture. So I believe that this idea that every time that we start a project, we start from the real beginning, we start from scratch, we start at nothing has ever been done before, is inside architecture itself. And this way of looking at architecture, I think that for us is very important because moves our attention from the, let's say, the semantic and values of architecture, so the value of form, to the performative values of form. So what a form is able to allow or to obstacle. The way we look at architecture is a way in which we look at architecture as a system of spatial rules, as I was saying before. Next. But and I have to say that we start every time from the beginning because we start from a sense of guilty. And I would like to read this page because it's very important to understand the way we work. This page which shows a little bit how the book is made, the first part, what we call in theory, which is made of images and short sentences. We claim the right to decide for people we do not know, residents who will come eventually, the stories, needs and desires of whom we can only interpret, and the true substance of which no process of participation can ever explain. And even if we could plunge like cover agents in the depths of others' daily lives, we will never surrender the pretense of choosing what is right for the lives of the others. We venture in the project with a sense of guilt, and with the awareness that we need to leave some room for indeterminacy in order to rectify our mistakes of interpretation and our delusions of omnipotence. So we start every time a project questioning the basic principle of architecture, having this feeling that architecture has something wrong in itself because as architects we always pretend to decide something for somebody else. So every project is a new beginning. Every day beyond the mound of rubble after the show, we resume our pursuit of what remains, the traces and fragments we use to reveal a meaning for what we do. With no certainties or biases, with a childish optimism instead, otherwise we will not be architects. This book is our guide in a path we have to go down every day from the beginning, from the very first naive but fundamental questions. So, for us, the design process is an experimental path, because we So this is the second part, the part in which Nika has been fundamental, and this is what we call in practice. Because if we approach the design process as a process in which we don't know what to do, and we have to try every path, and we have to experiment any possible solution, and we have to verify every possible hypothesis. In this case, it's very important that we are really rigorous in organizing our methodology. Also, I think that the second part is very much related to the use of digital tools that we use in a way that is not, let's say, the digital fashion, but it's a way to use the digital tool to fill continuously the gap in between reality and the way we present reality. Because I believe that the tool that we use has created a gap in between what we observe and the way we represent what we observe and the way in which we present the project. So the second part of the book is a set of instructions in which, in relationship with the principles stated in the first part, there are some specific instructions to follow those principles and to put them into practice in order to keep this wandering through the multiple possibilities, to infinite possibilities of the project, and have a kind of direction. Next one. So every project is a new beginning, and every project, I think the best projects are those projects which start for us from this basic and naive questions. And those projects are the projects that in the book appear here and there, because sometimes they are the best project to explain a concept, but there are also some projects that are more recent, that have more materials to show, so the methodology that you can find returning in the pages of the book. Yes. So, some basic fundamental questions. If we are architects, what we do basically is composition. Composition means to compose, to componere, from the Latin componere, which means to put people together, to put things together, to create communities. And the way we compose things, we think that it makes a big difference. So, let's say that geometry is a tool in which we can compose things in a different way. And next, there is a strong difference for us in between the order that we can give to things. If we decide to give the order that we have seen before, or this order, for example, it makes a great difference. For people like us who cannot speak or believe, the order we use to compose things still has a value. Just as children who play ring of roses, or soldiers who go on parade, or batters on a public beach, or the inmates surrounded by panopticon. The way we order things changes the way things and people, of course, relate in between them. Next. So, for example, we have been working very much, and those projects are in the book, about the idea how a form, a shape of space, can compose a community. From the scale of the urban corridor in this project in Geneva, from, for example, the projects for schools that we have done, in which we have always tried to create this idea of community by composing together different identities. Next. Like in this school, is an old project for a school here in Rome. Next. That is organized like a little village around a core, a center. Next. Or at different scales, like in this urban study, now I just this concept image on the city of Almeria, or next, something that we have done together with Alberto Iacovoni and UIPP, like in this school in Iraq. So this school is the realization of this principle, of course, that we share, this idea that we have shared with those other groups of architects, the idea that a school, so a collective building, can be made as a, can describe, can build the idea of community still living to the different classrooms, specific identity. In this case, it's clear, I think, the idea that the space is organized in the shape of a village, and that the different classrooms have their own position, they have their own identity, also given by the different shades of blue that are used for painting the building. And then at the center, in the center of this circle, of this community, there is the most communal building, which is the library, which is also higher and which is also more open to the and more permeable to the community living in the school. Another concept that we are obsessed with is this idea that as architects we are educated to design things and volumes, but usually life happens inside voids, inside nothingness. Even though we design and lay solid elements into space, we live and move into void. We have to use the nothingness between things in order to create a space for life. And this concept has been applied in this project, for example, for the cultural center in Genève. This is a concept image, the idea of creating a building around the void. In this case, the figure is not the building in itself, but it's the void which is in between the different parts of the building. And in this case is a cultural center in which the public space is this atrium with a script that cuts through the building and becomes part of the network of the public space and is painted with gold, because the idea was to reveal this interior as a kind of public treasure, a public common capital, common good. Or at a completely different scale, this was the project of which we had been in the little circles, colored circles before, for this urban study for the city of Almere, where the main idea for the master plan was to design, instead of the built part, a network of voids connecting the different neighborhoods, the different districts of the city, with the idea that designing through the void, this void was also the border, the limit in between the different communities, and the idea that this limit and this border could become a shared space, kind of translating literally the meaning of the word confine, that comes from Latin confinis, which means the common end between different spaces. So here in this case, the void is the border becomes fixed and becomes a space in which people can meet and gather and have most of the public activities. And then the same concept was brought on a completely higher scale in these images for a Venice Biennale in a long time, I don't remember, 2 years ago. 12th Venice Biennale. Alan? 2008? Okay. Another basic concept, what we call the urban gravitation. Just like interstellar dynamics, urban processes also rely on gravitational laws that require a certain critical mass to form in order to prevent the atoms from dispersing into the void and instead cluster and mix into nebula, planets, stars and galaxies. The effect of the random fluctuation of matter in interstellar space during the flow of eras can be accelerated in the urban space by condensing frequently used public activities or the heavy particles of architecture, by amplifying the potential of attraction of a place and the opportunities for encounter, interaction and exchange. What we do usually when we start a project, we work on the program and we try to condense all the public activities around the space in order to create this kind of critical mass. We work always by trying to condense the built part on one hand and the empty space on the other hand. This was another project for another biennale for the future of the area of the Expo, where the city was all condensed along the central street, and then the rest of the space was left empty. Or like in this project for a new university, for the Alberto University in Otaniani in Finland next, where we brought all the public activities of the university in this space, in this huge space, where everything was, from the lockers, the library, what was there, the mensa, the restaurant, everything was in this space which was in continuity with the public space. So we brought all the activities at this ground level in continuity with the public space of the campus, and then we put all the classroom at the upper level. So again, condensing all the public activities in one space in continuity with the public space, where then all the classrooms, again with this idea of creating community but still keeping an idea of identity that we've seen before, where kind of a singular building added one close to the other. Next. Other concept which basic questions, changing states. We are obsessed with the idea of interaction. We have been working in our office also with the idea of interaction in the technological sense, making interactive installation, but we are very much fascinated on how we could make architecture transformable using the basic elements of architecture, the most simple, the most elementary elements of architecture. And this project that is one of our, let's say, founding projects was a project for a square in the, well, this is not the project, of course, but we were commissioned some years ago to design a little square in the south of Italy, in the city of Bari. And every time when we started to design the square, we stopped in the moment when we had to place the benches. This was really a moment of crisis for us. We didn't know how to distribute the benches in space. And every time we went back to this fantastic garden in Paris next, where you can do something fantastic. You can move your chair and you can put it wherever you want. While our experience when we go in a public space is that usually, if it's summertime, the benches which are free are under the sun, On the contrary, if it's winter, the benches free are those in the shadows. And also, if you go there with, I don't know, a group of friends, 10 people, you never find a bench close to the other, because the architect, of course, has distributed the bench in space more or less equally. This garden was for us an incredible suggestion, because here you can move the chairs wherever you want. You can be in the sunlight, you can be in the direction from where you are waiting for somebody, you can gather with friends. So when we were asked to design this square, we said, how can we make this thing possible without making a border, a fence around the garden, like in the Paris gardens it's happening? Well, maybe in this case we can move the benches, like little playgrounds for kids, and move the benches in order to put them in the light or in the shadow, or to put towards somebody who we are waiting for. Or for example, for gathering groups, and also maybe during the night, we can place the lights in order to have variations in the light. Next. And that's what we did. The square was realized. The benches are a little bit wider than usual. They don't have a back, because that allows to have a more free use of the benches, or also in this case, the object in itself has a kind of a degree of interpretation. Next. And then what is fun next? What is fun? I mean, what is tragic is that when the square was inaugurated, and during the inauguration the benches were free to move it, but then the mayor asked us to put a lock in the benches, because they were scared that the fact that the benches could move would kind of excite too much the people. And then the benches actually are locked, they cannot move, because that was seen as kind of a problem. This idea that public space could be transformed by the people was something that was seen as dangerous. I have to say that though this is a failure, at least this situation, this configuration, which is how the benches were locked, anyway, allows to have a very informal way of using the space. Next. And then we have continued in many other projects to try to apply this idea of moving things in the most simple way, without using complex technology, by using sliding walls, making buildings, imagining buildings next that were made just of windows or just of doors, so in which every wall is a door, so that you can really open and close every space, and also maybe the facade can become something that can be open and can have multiple configurations. Another basic question, and maybe it's the most difficult one, is can we let architecture leave trace? Can we let dwellers leave trace in architecture? If we start this always to our design process with this sense of guilt of designing something for somebody else, can we leave architecture open in some ways? We are the actors of a process that began before us and will continue after us. We collect and transform materials and energies into something that others will use and in turn transform. We are part of a system of relations that belongs to both space, place and time, and includes the energy and environmental resources we use, as well the needs and desires of the men and women we design for. We are the future of the place we settle on, and the foundations of those who will come eventually. How can we open the project to those people that we don't know, that will dwell and live our architecture? Maybe the easiest thing is to leave something undesigned, to leave a kind of blank space. And maybe what we have to do is to leave something undesigned, and also to put ourselves in the background. So to make an architecture that can be able to welcome and structure the traces and the different identities inside it, without, of course, destroying it. So we can do this from a very superficial point of view, like, for example, in this case, this little extension of a school in Bari, where we have just left the surface, so superficial in the literal sense, where we have left the surface of the building to the appropriation of its inhabitants, so to the students next, through a participative process that we have proposed to the municipality, where we have invited the students to make a photograph workshop, students that were selected after a competition inside the school. And after this workshop next, we decided to choose for some images to place on the facades next. Those images were basically the faces of the students and the pictures that they took of themselves while playing during the workshop. So, I mean, this building can be seen as an example on how we can leave the building as a blank page, as a white space, as a white space in which then we can let sedimentate. I don't know if this is the right word. Sediment. On the skin. But we could also imagine to go a little bit further, and imagine an architecture in which really there can be more interaction. This is a very old project. This was a project for a European competition, for a housing complex built during the 60s in the outskirts of Paris, where we proposed both on the buildings and on the public space something that was kind of a blackboard, a space that could be drawn and designed and transformed continuously. Both on the facades, where the facades were kind of space added to the buildings that could be appropriated and transformed by the dwellers, and both also in the public space. It was a project in which it was very difficult to make an image, because in this case we had to figure out how to be a building after a while, after the intervention of the people. So the idea that was that the public space was a kind of blackboard in which we could have different types of activities, parking, playgrounds, but also weekly markets, various type of interactive and playful devices. And then the facade of the building were just made of modules that could be transformed and changed by the dwellers following their needs. This project has a very similar story I want to tell you, because like, the first delusions that you had from the first, let's say, girlfriends that you had, boyfriends, is something that remains into you, something that will teach you something about life. And in this case was something that really was really impressive for us. Well, we won the first prize, we went to the prize ceremony, and when we went there, we met the representative of the mayor. The mayor was not there. They were very angry. They told us that they would have built any project but not ours, because we were proposing in this project, what we were proposing was a device for letting people become actors in this process. And they told us, you are proposing something which is public, which belongs to the people, but the space is not public. The space belongs to the Republic. And the Republic now, it wants to make all this public space private, because this is a very sensitive district in which we have many, many conflicts between people. And so the only way to manage these conflicts is to make the space private. What happened in this competition? It happened that in the jury that day, a guy that was a representative of the municipality was sick. So the architects were the majority, and so they made the project win. Because they saw many potentialities in this project. But on the other side, the politics were really scared, and they were thinking that in that situation was impossible to develop that project. Also, they told us very bad things like, these guys that are living here, they don't share our culture. It's not like you Italians, when in the 50s you came here, at least we share the same religion. Now with this guy, we don't understand each other. And then we think that the courtyard, because the building is a courtyard, it's a kind of, it stimulates the criminality, because all the drug dealers can stay in the four corners. So we want to destroy everything. So that was a really shocking thing. But the strange thing is that we were not proposing something. We were not proposing something so radical. What we were proposing, something that happens in Paris, for example. This is an old print of the Boulevard Richard Lenoir, which is a boulevard that goes from Place de la Bastille towards the north. Well, this boulevard next is exactly the space we were proposing for public space, a space which is usually an empty asphalt ground, and then that weekly it hosts weekly markets. So it's something very, very simple. And also, for the facade, for the building, we were proposing something that in Italy is very common, so that the people can appropriate their lodges and close them. So something that was really based on a kind of a use of real things and to make them part of the project, what we like to call a kind of augmented reality. The truth is that we have two models, basically, both for public space and for architecture. For the public space, this is our model. This is a fantastic square. I don't know if anybody of you has ever been there, Place du Matin, Marrakesh. Those pictures are from an old movie by Alberto Iacovoni, the second version of the Man Who Knew Too Much, I think. And the movie, which is a spy story full of intrigues and incredible stories, starts from this place, because this is still today an amazing place next. A space which is really the encounter of people, of merchants, an encounter of different stories. Nowadays, if you go there, every afternoon happens these incredible things. There are hundreds of people gathering. And there are people telling stories. Which kind of stories? Stories from the local tradition. People speaking in the local language. So it's not something for the tourists, okay? They speak in Berber, in Arab, so there are some tourists around, but you don't understand anything. So it's a place in which it's a huge void, in which there is nothing, in which every day people gather and they share a communal tradition. Next. And also there is another incredible thing happening every night. Next. There are, I think, I don't know, maybe 50 little restaurants that pop up, that are not there during the day, and they sell food. The most traditional one, they sell just one plate. So, for example, you sit on one restaurant and you can eat boiled eggs, or goat's heads, or I don't know, maybe also some more nicer things like, you know, fried fish, or other things. So, if you want to have a full dinner, you have to move from one restaurant to another. And this place is basically an empty space. There is nothing. There is no design. It's just a void. And is a square that has been listed under the UNESCO heritage sites, not because there is any architecture, just because of its oral tradition. So, this is a model for us, because it's just something made of nothing, but which worked perfectly, just because architects have never designed anything. And one of the most intriguing explanation of the meaning of the word, of the name Place du Matin, is a square of nothing. Next. And the other model we always look towards are the favelas, the shanty towns, all those places in which there are very few rules or no rules at all, and there are incredible things happening from an architectonic point of view. Next. This is a fantastic model, for example, the Trevi Lima housing project. Trevi Lima housing project was a project of the 60s when many important architects at the time were invited to design those neighborhoods in which the idea was that just the 30% of the architecture was designed, and then the rest was left to the dwellers to be built afterwards. It's something that has been used in this case. I think that this project, I don't know if it's from James Stirling or somebody like this, so a little part of that is designed by an important architect. Of course, the part that you see up are designed by dwellers. Next. And we find in this kind of controlled chaos, a richness and intensity and really, next, also a care of the details sometimes. Next. A care of the architecture, which comes really from direct intervention over a public footprint. Maybe you know better the project by Alejandro Aravena, Elemental, which is based on this long tradition which spans all over South America. So those are our models. So can we say, next, that this is a kind of revolutionary approach? No, we think that more than revolutionaries, prossima, we can define ourselves utopian realists in this sense, that we in this search, starting always from scratch, what we find most interesting is to look at reality, to see how reality can be, a starting point. In an architecture that should value the performance offered to its users more than its own form, poetics feeds on the reality one wants to be part of. It digs in the endless mass of unaware architectures, perhaps far from elegant and rather hybrid, that cover 99% of our territory in order to extend its values and smart choices. It collects elements and details that belong more in a hardware shop than in an architectural magazine and relocates them into a sort of low-tech, augmented reality. Because the most radical action highlights the potential for a revolution in what already exists. And that's it, basically, a short presentation of the Ma0's Little Pink Book, which is of course fiction, but is very close to reality. But still, I mean, I think that the second part is very much how, while you are in this exploration with those principles of the first pass, how not to get lost, how to try, and now I hope that Nika, that has been working very much in the second part, and also I really like to work with her because she was kind of, a critical point of view on my work. Because, of course, let's say that Ma0's is an office made of 3 persons, and it's a place in which we discuss every time. We are very different in between among us. But I mean, Nika, she has been for how many years? 6. For 6 years, really following the whole design process, from the big discussions on the ideas to how we make a drawing. So it was very important to work with her because it was really a point of reference. And maybe you can answer a little bit to Luca.
Sorry for my English, first of all. The only things I can say is that if in the first part lost is a good thing, to continue in this, if I want to be lost forever in the project, I need to not be lost while I'm drawing the project. So this is the second part. The second part is made of good practice. It's not really so revolutionary. It's something just to speak the same language as we are speaking. We're trying to speak in English here to make what we are saying understandable by everybody. So this is the point. It's a good practice and not a series of rules. Of course, that's it. So,
anyway. What is funny is that there are two different types of readers of the book. Somebody really likes the second part. Somebody said, maybe the best page is the one in which you have the order of the folders in the computer. And some others, for example, I like very much the first part, of course, because I'm more free. Of course, it can be more pure than in the second part. And it's true also that the images of the first part are cleaner, are more, they follow the narrative in a better way. Why in the second part is much more, maybe also heterogeneous. It's a much more diverse selection of drawings and images. So, but because practice is like that. So it's made of things that are clear, pure, and consistent, and in some parts which are very, sometimes in which you have different things that one against the other.
So if someone wants to make a question, because you invite also other
I invited
people that they can...
Well, I would like to have a question from Laura, from Gianfranco, from everybody. Here, because I think that, maybe the book is not so important. It's nice if this would be a start for a discussion. Matteo. Un'altra destra, l'ultima icona a destra.
No, okay, I will not say all the things that I like, because I think it's not useful and no one is interested. But I want to ask you something that is related to the page in which you describe the fact that all the time you have to start again. I really hate this.
Exactly.
And I think that is also a bit dangerous and also not true.
Not true, you're a liar.
In the sense that the experience that we have, the fact that actually you want to work on a manual, so something that fixes a series of rules, and sometimes you put models, sometimes you put space in which you feel that you can perceive and understand the meaning of your idea of architecture. So when you have all these elements, why you want to apply this, I think, bad rhetoric of saying that you have to start all the time again? I really think that it's so bad.
Well, yeah.
Not just because you spend all your life trying to overcome problems and do another step. I always think that my life is kind of video game, and all the time that I am in a new...
You have to start from the beginning, yes.
Yeah, place, okay, I'm here, now I probably have more lives. And you want to start from the beginning, and actually it's so boring. I mean, all the time at the beginning that you have to explain, so...
Well,
that's it.
Laura forse voleva aggiungere una cosa.
And I totally do agree. But especially about you, about the method, I would call it, of your office. And it's absolutely not true. One thing is the fact that you, in the way in which you work, are constantly able to be surprised of something. And something else is to say that every time you start from the beginning. And because I also think that it's not like that, in this constant and precise research of sense, which is, in my opinion, the real method of the office, stay also the fact that connects the two parts of the group. Because as in the first part, the capacity of being free comes from a precise approach, which has certain precise, even, how do you say, modificability, free but principles, exactly like in the design methods. In the second part, we can say that, okay, layers have some rules, but you can discover things even through the layers. And so the method brings together some constant element which can come from the daily working method, and from the other hand, from the vision that you have of architecture, of social approach, of possibility that architecture has to change life. And the interesting part is that, in my opinion, the most interesting sense of this book is really the capacity to see this process, not in the middle of your life, but in important, probably, moments of the life of the office. So to really see things from a certain distance, see things in time, defining some aspects which are not starting every time from the beginning.
Dobbiamo usare il microfono per forza?
Sì, sì, ma se accendi anche la luce?
Accendiamo anche la luce, sì.
This is a very good point, of course. I have three answers to that. I don't know if none of this is satisfying the questions. But the first one is that I show a picture of Munari. But for example, I really love a guy like an architect like Castiglioni. And I remember Castiglioni, he was a guy that every time that he had to design something, he was dismantling it. He was completely taking, he had to design a lamp, and he was dismantling the lamp, and it was every time starting from scratch, trying to understand what were the use and the values and how the components were working with a specific goal or program or function. And I think that this process maybe is not a rhetorical approach, it's a methodological approach, which is different, okay? So I had to kind of dismiss all that I know about architecture, to rediscover the values, and then to make those values alive. So this is the first thing, because if I start every time just knowing my 10 principles that are on the first part of the book, I think that those principles will become kind of, lettera morta, like dead words. So I think that starting from the beginning is not a rhetorical thing, but it is a methodological question. The second thing is, I think that as architects, sometimes we are we need to be brought every time to basics. I'm really convinced about that. Sometimes our discourses that fly very high, they bring us too far from reality, too far from what is, let's say, the ethical and also political values of architecture. So this idea of starting from scratch is also a way to every time root us very well in what we could call reality, which of course is not something independent, but something that we describe every time. But if we have to get lost and try to understand reality every time, maybe we could have a view on reality which is not pre-informed by our ideas. So I think that it's really a question of methodology. Another answer could be that I feel like this because maybe I'm not enough a good architect. So every time I feel that I don't have the answer ready. So every time I feel that it's so difficult, it's so exhausting to make a project. Every time it's a kind of research that every time you have to go in one direction, then go back, and then to go in another direction, then go back. I would love to be more sure when I do my project, straight towards the direction, towards one direction, instead of trying to make, I don't know, like the project for Vernier. I don't know how many models, but I think that this is normal. It belongs to many architects, not only to me. But I always feel not good enough. I think I would love to start a project and say, this is the idea, and go straight. I know some architects, some friends that maybe work more like this. So maybe it's also my problem, so that's why I have to start from the beginning.
But if you want to solve the problem next time, if you start from the end of the previous project, I'm sure that you will reach the result.
Well, but of course, every time we start a project, we have a set of solutions ready. You could do like this, okay, let's do like this, let's of course. But then you never find the right solution like this. You always have to rework everything.
Yeah, but everybody used to work if you want to make a project. This is not just your problem. I mean, it's something that we share all together. The fact that you cannot, of course, start the project having already the solution.
Yes,
That's
I know,
but
but I think that, for example, there are architects that are, for example, maybe a language which is more defined, that they have a kind of, a set of defined forms and solutions that they can apply more easily. So, in our case, and maybe this is a problem of immaturity, and we never had this set. Everything is possible every time, and so we could be many different architects at the same time.
But why?
We like to think like that.
You don't have to convince. No, but I don't want also to convince. No, but I
Because it's
feel that,
impossible to convince.
no, but I feel that you really work on this idea of coherence. From my point of view, that's why you work on a manual, that's why you control everything. Actually, why you don't change all the time the color of the layer? If you want really to discover something, probably it would be better if the forms are blue in the black, so that you cannot
Don't tell this to get now because it's not.
But I have to fix some kind of alcune sicurezze devo lasciare. Now, what I mean here we have to.
Second question,
Yeah.
why you feel guilt if you have the chance to make and design a space?
I think that there is substantial limit in the idea of designing architecture, which of course brings us to a kind of bifurcation, which could bring us towards a completely different approach. So, which is mainly the question is, what is the relationship between form and what we could call behaviors, relationships, social interaction and so on. This is my main interest, okay? So there are architects who say, like Alberto, who say, it doesn't matter because anyway, then a cathedral can become, I don't know, whatever, no? Can become a B&B, then can become a brothel, and then can become other things. So I still think that when you design something, and this is maybe also another limit of me and my generation, maybe, or I mean, me that I came out from the university and kind of refusing this kind of approach, the idea of autonomy of architecture, and so I'm a little bit in between. So I'm still interested in that thing. So how form determines, allows relationship, because for me this is the basic ethical, political value when I start to design something. That maybe after 20 years that will become something else, but I would like also to take into account this possibility for the future. So the problem is that I'm defining with stable and heavy and generally unchangeable forms something that I really don't know, because I'm conscious of this distance between me and what will happen in the building, okay? So this is the main, the reason for feeling guilt. I mean, maybe guilt is not guilty, maybe guilty is not the right word, but I think it's the main contradiction in which architecture acts. If we get rid of this problem, of course we'll go in a completely different direction, but for me which still has a direction that for me is not enough for funding the first design acts.
A stupid question. If there is this situation of condition in which you every time have to refine a new equilibrium, why did you choose this image for the presentation, which has such a absolute impact?
Yes, but is it speak is not right. Is it different? So it's not the red book of now, it's the pink book of is the pink book of ma0's of now. Because we live in this strange condition, I always say, I come from a generation, I mean, my sisters, they were a little bit older than me, they had lived the 77 in Italy, which was a very important political moment. It was a moment of big tension. So I'm still, I've been fed by this kind of political condition, and then I grew up in the 80s. So in the moment in which all this idea of political engagement, of being a communist and being against the capital was completely lost, and so I mean I'm in between. So I understand that still those I mean this need for a political engagement is very important. At the same time, first I don't see the rising of a new workers' class, like, I mean, somebody in between us, are looking at that. I'm very sorry that the comrade Sacconi is not here, Compagno Sacconi, to discuss about this. But I mean, I don't see the rising of a new political situation. So I believe, for example, there was in a book that, for me at least, has been quite important, that was Estetica Relazionale by Nicola Burio. He was referring to Marx, talking about the concept of interstice. And he said that the interstice is this space in which temporarily, or in some places of our society, there is the possibility of getting free from the laws of the capital. So we are pink because we don't think that really revolution is possible, but because we always try in a quite ingenious way to find those interstices in which bench could move and then they cannot move, in which people could appropriate, they lodge us, but then they tear down the whole building. So it also, the search for these interstices is very difficult, but it's always something which triggers our project, that definitely gives us a little bit of energy, and so we play with this idea of the revolutionaries, but exactly we're not. We look at reality and we like to look at reality as a potential for changing things, maybe not. I don't know. revolution.
Why you never quote architecture? Why you never quote architecture? I mean, you quote
Never mention it.
mention. Okay, quote. You mentioned, for instance, buildings in favelas. You mentioned space that are made by just men. I mean, like the one in Morocco, right? It's Morocco. Or, for instance, you also showed a series of pictures of houses somewhere with lodges with glass surround. Why you never show something that, and this is architecture?
This is a very good question. Well, let's say in the book there are some quotes about writers that write about architecture. So I mean,
Just a few.
That's a very good question, but because I think that, I mean, on one hand, architecture that I study and I learn is something which is part of my, it's kind of like, it's part of my background, but it's not making me wonder like those things. I always wonder, and I'm surprised and excited when I see something unexpected happening. Architecture is always very much design and control. I find it more boring than what happens in let's say, in reality.
Yes, sometimes also architecture is in the reality, not all the time.
No, for sure, but I mean, architecture is always a very controlled process. It's always something which you can say, oh, how nice is this thing, how a great architect, those spaces are amazing and everything, but it's something in which this idea of surprise or something that gets out of control. I don't know, this is something that I find every time very interesting, because it's something that was not part of this a little bit this process that I find always paradoxical. That I don't know, the moment of defining reality, defining a world, a part of a city, of building everything in one office, in one space, which is far away. Maybe sometimes we do competition for places on the other side of the world. And when I say things growing up like this that you don't expect, that they are maybe not correct, architecture is always correct, consistent with their work. So it's this kind of surprise that I find always very rich and stimulating.
No question? Come on. I'm talking with Alberto from 91, so please. Okay, so, yes.
No.
Who is the final user of this book? I mean, except for the guys in the office. Students, other architects. Should we use your CTB?
Okay. First of all, it's myself, because it's a way to kind of put some point. I mean, it's true that I wrote this in a moment of also confusion, so it was a kind of personal psychoanalytical thing, so maybe this is not interesting for anybody to buy it. But, well, I have to say that maybe the second part is true, that the second part is more for really for beginners. It's something which maybe I don't know to say to Massimo Dizzi how to organize the folders or the layers. But I think that mostly the first part for me was had the presumption to try to define a kind of common ground, to define some principles, some elements on which we could start a discussion. So I think that those, the first part is something that would be base for a discussion. Maybe it's too elementary. So somebody could say, for example, my partner Luca, he read the book and he said, "So what? You're saying kind of obvious things." I said, okay, maybe it's like this. Maybe I have to repeat always every time to myself obvious things. But I think that that from these basic things can start a discussion. And I think that now, I think that you're very polite in this moment, but I think that we could also go in a more, let's say, strong, also questioning stronger some things that are maybe not so openly said in the book. But it's true that, I mean, we are in a moment, I think, in which architecture is a moment of which there are different approaches, no? And those approaches sometimes are on different sides. I always remember once Francesco Garofalo, I was talking to him that I was discovering Kim Tang. He said, come on, Kim Tang. When I was in the United States, and one time I arrived, I don't know, Van Eyck or somebody of that area, everybody was saying those old boring guys, and there were guys like Aldo Rossi, I don't know. Anyway, it was the moment in which Tim Ten was old and Aldo Rossi was new. And then I came out of university in which Aldo Rossi was old and Tim Ten was new. And now again we're in a moment in which the Tim Ten is old and then Aldo Rossi is new. So I'm kind of, you know, a little bit annoyed by this kind of opposition, and I think that we should kind of get out of this kind of magic circle in which we don't get out and we always... And so, I mean, I don't know if the book is really good for this. It was a way to kind of find some elements that I think they don't belong exactly to one side or the other, but to find some elements of discussion that I would like to be, that I mean, that my desire is that it could be a starting point for a discussion. Also, not only with beginners, but also with grown-ups.
And can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you, it's very short. Can you imagine a big number 2?
No. First of all, I don't want anymore to make a book about my work. I would like very much to make a research now on other guys' architectures, and now I want to stop. I think that this is a moment, and maybe as every book is always, you know, the moment in which you collect things, and then you're ready to maybe also to go in another different direction. Yeah.
First of all, you mentioned Nicolas Bourriot, and the paradox, of course, is that that art he describes is an art which exists only in the gallery world. Even if you actually move a relational art project to here, to, for example, a place like Montreal, or even in the Amazon jungle. I mean, it remains part of, so it remains separated. And of course, I mean, and also, I want to connect precisely to what you were saying about, Team 10 being old and also being new, and then eventually the opposite, and eventually the opposite. In a few days, there will be the release of the special 50th anniversary edition of Sgt. Pepper, which will have one box set with about 4 CDs of unreleased material, plus the 5+1 remix of the album, etc., etc. And then it will have a double vinyl album, a double CD, a triple CD, etc., etc. In 1967, if they were operating that same way, they would have had a release of the first, 78 RPM record of, say, Robert Johnson from 1917. So in a way, I think something's got stuck, badly stuck here, And of course, I mean, this is not a criticism, of course, of the idea of doing ma0's or ma0's pink book, little pink book. Even if, of course, we know that pink in English, like pink literature, is it's something slightly different from pale red. This is, I would call it pale red or pink things. So it's something slightly different. But maybe it's fine. I think it's fine. Anyway, I think that is I think a big issue. A big issue of whatever we do, we all are. Still, kind of banging our heads, and also that reminds me of something else. This thing of banging your head consistently, relentlessly in the same issues. it's like the vinyl album.
Yes.
When the groove, you get to the run out groove and the arm, the styles get stuck. You get and this is exactly what the Beatles did with Sgt. Pepper. Actually, they created a run out groove, which had a little like 50-second song, which had to be played in reverse. And actually, it was made in a way in which the album continued to repeat the run-out groove endlessly. So I think this is actually an issue. But I think what you're trying to do, and I found your presentation very, very interesting, very intriguing, because I think what you're trying to do, at least, is actually trying to do something which is not going back to the kind of Aldo Rossi idea of architecture, so in a way, whatever happens, architecture. But at the same time, it seems to me that you're not trying to do the opposite thing, which is to basically cast yourself or yourselves as radical architecture. I think radical architecture. So basically, because that is the same thing, like we are either we are tendenza or we are radicals, 50 years later, and then also I think that some of the actual things you actually have realized to the office, I think, of course, and this is maybe the question. I think you're actually trying to envisage a third possibility, which is small things, small interventions, small in the sense, not planetary. It's not like, doing the continuous monument as not as something you want to make, but something you want to sort of denounce, or you want to do. You're not trying to do, something which is like, kind of imposing on the landscape a new, built version of the cubicle. Is that correct? So small things, and so in a way it's a kind of small scale revolution, if you like, rather than a big scale revolution or reaction.
Well, I have to say that I think that there is a question. I think that we live in an era of nostalgia. So also I remember Gabriele Mastrini. He came the last semester from Nerve to make a lecture at Super Studio, and I told him, but why is so popular? And he told this that I was not expecting. He said that, well, because there is a kind of nostalgia of the future in some ways. So they represent a nostalgia of the future that we don't have anymore. I come from a generation to which was promised that in 2001 we were reaching Jupiter, and it didn't happen. What I had, on the contrary, was this. So the black monolith is this one. It's not anymore the one of Kubrick. So I agree. I really like the image of the record of Sgt. Pepper's. I always think, for example, now I turn on the radio and there is full music of the 80s, and I always think, when I started to listen to music, it was late 70s. It was like if I was hearing at the radio something before late 50s. That was something that for me was kind of prehistoric thing. So we are, of course, in a kind of loop, and which is, I think, very much fed by nostalgia and nostalgia. I don't know what is the English way. Nostalgia. So how we get out from this? I don't know if it's a question of being small, but I think it's a question of being in some ways realist and being more objective. So trying to deal with simple things, trying to think about architecture as something which can be much more simpler, that can be related to a more domestic reality than to have big signs that we can put into the landscape. So also this interest for self-built architectures. It's an interest from to try to look to what we have around us, because I think that, for example, I think that we have an immense amount of built legacy that we have to deal with. that is there, and we are talking about continuous monuments. And what is this about? So I think that getting back to reality in this sense is the best way today to be also a little bit utopian, because otherwise, utopia, it's kind of really of escape that is not interesting anymore, I think, because also the only way in which we can be utopian today is to look back at the past, which doesn't make any sense at all, I think.
But you don't feel that self-made architecture is a bit nostalgic?
Rudolski.
Huh?
Rudolski.
No, I don't
It's
think...
more nostalgic than, I don't know, one continuous monument.
No, I think, no, well, I don't want to promote a self-made architecture. This is not so this is, for me, for example, the reason why I like very much the work of Beniamino Servino is because I think that, well, of course, he is special because he has a fantastic hand, he's very talented, but I mean, he's looking at that reality, and he's trying with his work to make an interpretation of this reality in which everything is equal. There is not a kind of the noble and the parvenu and the people. So everything is on the same level, and architecture is something that has to deal. Then he does this with its way. So for me, it's not a vernacular, let's say, nostalgic approach. How nice is the little thing that the guy is in the. But to me, this is more the idea that also when you look at self-built architecture, you face yourself with a culture which is devastated. There is nothing vernacular or picturesque, nothing, because you have people that want to build a Palladian house copied from Hollywood and then brought back in Caserta, for example. So there is nothing nostalgic in this. This is simply something in which you have an incredible mix of tradition, of trash coming from TV, from cinema. You have an incredible mix, but then in this reality you can find, I think, many stimulating elements, and that's the reality from which we should start, instead of thinking that once we will have again a strong political power that can allow us to make straight and absolute architectures on one hand, or I don't know, too simple in saying this, but anyway.
Alberto, something else. Is it perhaps that you decided that the book, of course there are some quotes, some kind of things, quoted from some authors, but you basically made the book into a very small, relatively small object, publication, and without an abundance of quotations, visual quotations and textual quotations and footnotes and all that. So, if I get it right, the idea of starting from scratch, like we were discussing before, it's not exactly so to be, to start, each time starts over again, but it's more like, like some architects and artists did during the 20th century, into the early 21st century, to clean, start from a clean slate and ask yourself, what is architecture? What does it mean for me? And for, and in a way Picasso used to say, a painter is a collector who wants to paint the pictures he wants to have in their collection. In other words, you want to write about the architecture you would like to see. Yeah? So, I mean, is it maybe this...
No, but the point is that Alberto, he doesn't want to have a collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fine. I mean,
want to have a collection?
You don't even want to have a collection, basically.
Well, no, it's not this. Well, I don't know. For me, it was like, like again when you say, okay, you are going in a desert island, you can bring with you just, 4 books. You try the 4 books that you bring with you. I was in the same condition in Qatar, in the middle of the desert, in a place in which all my ideas about the city, about identity, about tradition were completely subverted. I had to speak to a bunch of 60 Qatari girls,
Let's do a big
What
tower,
is-
tower. Just count the money. So this is the solution.
Yeah.
So what do you bring with you as some kind of, fundamental things that you could kind of, like, 10 commandmenti, like something which you, so yes, it was really kind of a way of wiping out everything, so that's why the book begins so wide without nothing, and trying to give something. You said that also, I made a book before Playscape. The first part was all made like this. It was a collage of quotes from other architects. So, and that was a little bit part of my way of writing. In this case, I wanted really to just keep a few things that also are some obsessions. There are some that are missing because I put them in the other books. Those are really the obsessions that I bring with me, like the things that somebody says to you, then reminds me forever. So.
I have a question. Nika was showing me the book. It was very interesting. It was very, I think it's a strong book. And independently from the vision, from your vision, from the writing inside, and from all the technical and different solutions inside, I think it's, for me, what I understood from the book is that much more than manual is an open process example. I mean, it looks much more like an open process. So it's not a method, but it's a completely open process, which I think is very interesting. I mean, the interesting part of the book is that shows the fact that we need an open process, especially for the city, especially for the town planning. I mean, this is something that I was really appreciating so much, because you don't have a unique vision. You don't have a unique answer, but you propose different possibilities. So it's, if you have to consider this book like a manual, I have to say, I wouldn't buy it. But if I consider the book as a possibility to understand how the process of developing the design for the city as well for architecture can be, then I would say you have to buy it, because we are a little bit losing this possibility. We are always working for images and for big response to the let's say, basic necessity of the people. And this is an open process possibility. So this is what I understood from the book, which I think is the most interesting thing of it. Is it correct, or is...
Absolutely. I think that, well, I mean, openness is part of our way of working. And then maybe the next time I should make a book just with white pages and just those little figures wandering around without maybe less architecture, so that it could be more open. Maybe the examples. What for example, I like most of the book talking about the images are those in which they're not projects in which you don't understand so much what is this about. But then we needed the images just to show how those principles would be related to a kind of practice. And the images are most of those we just the little men that are going around. Because exactly the book is like this. Next time it will be a book with instruction and then a white page in front of it, just to sketch it or to use it during the design process. Yeah. You absolutely got the point.
The next book is a Moleskine.
It's a Moleskine.
So that would be the number 2, you see? It's a process that should be the number 2.
So let's do it. I don't want to write anymore.
Do a pin print.
I know the owner, so don't worry.
You know the owner of Moleskine?
Thank you very much.
Il libro non si trova in libreria praticamente solo su Amazon, questo diciamo.
If you want to buy the book, I have some copy. I did a copy of the book. I can sell to you half of the price. No, we will have when we have the opening of the unbuilt Rome soon.
CAMPO, a space to debate, study and celebrate architecture.